Welcome to the Go Electric Fleet Show. This is where we sit down and chat about EV fleets, infrastructure, and more. Join us as we explore EV fleets here in BC. Joining me in studio now is Brendon James, producer of the Go Electric Fleet Show, to talk about his chat with Charlotte and to provide some insights into what data is important and how that data can work for you to make things easier. Hey, Brendon, thanks for the chat.
Thanks, Andrew. It was a great pleasure connecting with Charlotte again, actually post-COVID as well, because I hadn't seen her in ages. A bit of background, Charlotte was actually working on the emotive electric vehicle campaign provincially back in 2016 when I started with Metro Vancouver, starting to work on the sort of same file, but just focused regionally. And over the years, she's been an incredible leader in getting me up to speed and somebody that I admire looking at in terms of the things that she talks about, the industries that she's worked in, and the incredible leadership that she brings to vehicle electrification and fleets, especially on the data-driven approach that businesses need to be able to make their business case for vehicle electrification.
And let's cut right to the chase here. Let's talk about data in fleet electrification, because as a layperson, when I hear words like telematics, my brain does that dial-up noise. If anyone's old enough to remember the dial-up noise.
Yeah. How does it work?
Exactly. Yeah. I'm just like, So I want to talk a little bit about what are telematics. Let's just start there. Define telematics for folks who, that might be the first time they're running into the word.
Well, I think that many people don't know that in some ways, maybe the vehicle that they drive currently, if it's Tesla or other vehicles, are actually connected to the internet of things. So if you're a Tesla driver, the Tesla system is incredibly advanced. It is data driven. It is telematics that are constantly being uploaded to the cloud, the Tesla cloud in the sky somewhere. And it's recording data on your driving habits and every single piece of data that is produced by a sensor in the vehicle is uploaded and recorded. And really it helps, Tesla as a company develop better products in the future, develop algorithms that are supporting drivers, whether it's through, sort of like the autopilot system, which they have, which is essentially self-driving to some ability, or for future self-driving capabilities, or just to make their products better, make their products more responsive, and the technology in these products better. So Tesla's a great example, but for some vehicles that don't have the ability to connect to the internet or the Internet of Things, they have to have a device that would be plugged into them that would allow the connection between the internal vehicle computers and the cloud to record the data of the sort of driving experience. So telematics essentially is the transfer of data from the vehicle systems to a recording device or a system in the cloud, and then to be able to analyze that data and use it to create a business case. So you're looking at average speed, average acceleration and deceleration, braking characteristics, the vehicle systems, whether the heater was on or the heater was off, all the power, load and draw from the system itself. All of these, multitude of sensors that are creating these data can be recorded and uploaded and then sort of analyzed and the data extrapolated at a later time. So that's really a basic explanation of it. And these sort of guys that are working for companies like Geotab, the techs that are creating these systems have been doing this for decades. And their systems are incredibly well pioneered and tested over that time as well.
Telematics is essentially then just all of the little vital signs, if you will, of what a vehicle is doing, how it's operating, what kinds of things it's doing, and really trying to understand where you can maybe make it more efficient, where you can maybe make things better, right?
Yeah, totally. So we're recording the characteristics from that vehicle. So if we're looking to do a full analysis on the current state of our fleet, we're going to start with a data-driven approach to be able to develop a business case for senior leadership and sort of our management of our company to say, you know what, there are some really good opportunities to replace an older gas or diesel-powered vehicle with a newer one that potentially could run on a plug-in hybrid state or a battery electric state or even hybridization that could be more fuel efficient and have less maintenance costs over time. So the data-driven approach is something that all companies are now looking to, right? So if you can't just take a justification of a big capital purchase out of nowhere. You have to have your justification and a data-driven approach to be able to get you to that end goal, and telematics can help you achieve that.
Now, alongside telematics, here's another phrase that I'm not super familiar with that you might be able to shine a little bit of light on, but EV suitability assessments. Now, EV suitability assessments will help you determine, what vehicles and, even at a smaller scale, what operations are most ready for electrification. So what does an EV suitability assessment consist of?
Yeah, so like last month, we were talking about Novix couriers. And I think that part of the story there was trying to educate both their staff, but also their senior management on the suitability of integrating electric vehicles or hybrid vehicles into the fleet and the process on which they embarked to be able to get to that end goal. And the suitability assessment is essentially, it's an analysis, it's a document, it's a study of your current fleet, the identification of your current fleet cycles, duty cycles, usage cycles, whatever you want to call them, how your vehicles are currently being used, and then doing an analysis about what electric vehicles are currently on the market, so battery electric, hybrid vehicles, or even plug-in hybrids that would be suitable to replace your current vehicle fleet elements at this time. So telematics help make this suitability assessment document or study, and then provide you that data to be able to make a business case and justify the expenditure of electrifying your fleet.
Now, beyond the basics here, where we're talking about what can we learn from how the vehicles operate, it's important to realize that when we think of fleet operations, when we think of fleet vehicles, what we're really kind of keying in on is some of the big, potential in terms of change or medium and heavy duty fleets, right? So what kind of challenges do medium and heavy duty fleets specifically face when it comes to electrification? The obvious one off the top of my head is range limitations, right?
Yep.
But what else do we have to consider when we're thinking about transitioning, a medium or a heavy duty fleet over?
Well, I think one of the slides that Charlotte presented to me was really incredibly profound, where it, over an analysis of hundreds or thousands of vehicles that they'd done, they kind of looked at the average kilometer usage of different style of business operations, right? So, the inner city, hub and spoke, over the road, those sort of like different styles of operation of a medium or heavy duty fleet. And, the average kilometers traveled associated with each of those different styles. And what really kind of struck out to me was there was sort of a high percentage of vehicles that would be suitable for replacement with electric vehicles just based on the current battery technology that's out there, and that would suitably fulfill the need of those fleets. And obviously, we've got some sort of thinking out there that, over-the-road trucking, like the diesel trucks that go long distances or thousands of kilometers in a trip, absolutely not. They're not suitable right now for replacement with battery electric trucks. And, many companies are testing the waters with this technology, suitable for that sort of class 8 sort of tractor trailer, long distance truck. But still the limitations are sort of the battery technology in order to be able to reduce the amount of charging, and then also the charging infrastructure and the power needs at the different depots along the road to be able to charge those vehicles is a limitation currently. However, if you're looking at sort of like the inner city scenario where you've got those Class 8 or those tractor trailers moving goods within the city from, sort of maybe it's like a out of the city depot or storage warehouse, and then doing deliveries sort of like your local Walmart or your Sobeys or something like that, there would be a suitable case for those companies or sort of those routes to be able to integrate battery electric, because they're kind of doing that delivery and then going back to a yard at the end of the day, potentially, where they would have a long dwell time so they can plug into a DC fast charger and get a full charge at the end of their day of sort of like moving goods from a warehouse to that sort of central location. And those are the kind of examples that are presented in that sort of slide, which is so profound to me to say, there is a need right now, or there's an opportunity to be able to replace some like large percentage of the fleet. And then as there's more integration of these vehicles in, and this technology and the research and development gets better, we're just going to see more opportunities presented where these trucks are going to be able to go further, their rate of charge is going to be reduced, and we're going to start encroaching on those sort of like long distance duty cycles and scenarios.
So would it be then accurate to kind of think of it as this is almost the beginning of a snowball effect then? As you start to transition some things, it makes everything else just that much easier. Is that accurate?
Yeah, potentially. I like to think about it as a spectrum, really, in essence. So, like the one end of the spectrum, we've got current state of operations with our diesel trucks, especially on the over the road side. And on the top end of the spectrum, there's this sort of like idealist perspective of saying everything's going to be battery electric and zero emission. Okay, and the more effort that's really been put into that R&D on the top end of the spectrum is benefiting the lower end of the spectrum when it comes to fuel efficiency, hybridization, integration of e-axles or electric axles into sort of the current fleet as well. And I feel like the better it gets at the top end, it's pulling the whole industry along. Right, it's making differences throughout the whole industry and incentivizing those big engine manufacturers like Kenworth and Detroit and those companies to really invest in the research of how are we making this stuff more fuel efficient. Our clientele relies so heavily on fuel costs and like reducing fuel costs. So how are we going to try and make it more cost effective for them in operating this through integration of hybridization or electrification, or really just changing the way that we're designing diesel engines and making them more efficient? And going further, reducing fuel, making them smoother, making wind resistance less. Like the drag coefficient on these trucks is changing. They're getting better at doing that. And really, in essence, like all those changes are driven by the research and development at the top end of the spectrum where it's full electrification.
One of the things that I also want to touch on here that I think is one of those items that might kind of fly under the radar until you have to really think about it and you go, oh, geez, I got to worry about this now, is charging infrastructure. Because medium and heavy duty fleets, you're not going to be necessarily plugging those into your standard wall outlet. With bigger vehicles comes bigger batteries, which means a greater demand for power and a greater need, especially when, you might have, some kind of logistics operation where you've got, vehicles coming in and out throughout the day, even throughout the night.
Yep.
So what kinds of, charging solutions for fleets are out there, and what kinds of benefits can we glean to, connect telematics and data to choosing the right kind of charging solution for your fleet?
Well, I think the big thing here is dwell time. And that really makes a massive difference in a suitability assessment. Is how long is that vehicle sitting stationary, and viewing that as an opportunity to plug it in and charge it. Another, Charlotte was mentioning that throughout their studies, they had come across the fleet that they were doing analysis on, and like a very large percentage of it had long dwell times that were suitable for overnight charging at a slower rate, like a sort of like a high current AC charging rate, or a shorter DC fast charge rate as well. And those vehicles would return to base at the end of the day. They'd be able to be plugged in, and then they had a full charge at in the morning when the driver came back and he was doing sort of his warm-ups and getting out. So they started the day with a full charge. So identification, using telematics to identify which vehicles in your fleet do sit for long periods, and are not used, the wheels are not turning. What are the advantages of making electrifying those vehicles because of that dwell time? And then, looking at the charging infrastructure that will complement that situation as well. Is it going to be level 2 charging, right? Do you have the ability to have, hours in between use cycles, or do you need to go and opt for a higher rate of power like a DC fast charger, which is going to shorten the length of the charge and be able to get that vehicle back out on the road to be able to make money, essentially.
And, speaking of making money, that at the end of the day, business operators, that's the lifeblood, right? And so one of the things that I think we're starting to pick up on, and the data side probably does so a lot more, we think about what kind of vehicles we need, what kind of charging infrastructure we need. How do we optimize our routes? How do we make things work better for us? But one of the things that I think they've really keyed in on is the underutilization of EV fleets. Yeah. So it's not even about worrying that we might run out of juice or something like that. But in what ways are the underutilization of EV fleets affecting business decisions on how to transition their business?
Well, I don't necessarily think it's EV fleets per se. I think it's the underutilization of many fleet vehicles. Mm-hmm. So I think that right sizing comes into play in this conversation. So as a part of our EV analysis is better understanding the size of vehicle that could do the job. Do we need to have a truck running this route, or do we need to have a pickup truck running this route, or do we need to have a Chevy Bolt running this route or doing this task? So I think right sizing is a great first stop, and then looking overall towards making sure that we're having a scenario where the wheels are turning the most efficiently, and being able to sort of identify where the low-hanging fruit is to replace them with electric vehicles, and really empowering that decision-making with a data-driven approach. This EV analysis and telematics are going to get you to that end goal. You're going to have a document, you're going to have an analysis to say, wow, we can actually see how these vehicles are being used. And wow, it's this vehicle that we have in our fleet right now is not actually appropriate for what we're trying to do. Maybe our work has changed and we're not pulling trailers anymore. We've transitioned our business to say we're not towing anymore. Okay, great. So do we need to have an F350 diesel or F250 diesel in the fleet? Or can we replace that with an F150 Lightning or something smaller? So I think that, it's all interrelated in terms of finding the right vehicles to the job, finding which vehicles could be EVs, and, having the right data at our fingertips to be able to tell that story is incredibly important.
And thinking about something that is relatively new to the field, if you will, and I believe you and Charlotte touched on this, is vehicle-to-grid technology, right? V2G technology. Yeah. So for those of us out of the loop, myself included, what is vehicle-to-grid technology, and how might that help a fleet operator in their decision-making process about where to go next? Yeah,
so V2G, vehicle-to-grid technology, is something that has been pioneered over the last couple of years. It's growing in momentum, and it's bi-directional charging that allows a vehicle that has a big battery to be able to support the grid, or the localized grid, through its charging technology and its charging port when it's plugged in, and act as a bigger battery for the grid system, to sort of peak shave or help with sort of those high load characteristics, whether it's localized grid or sort of helping the power technology and the transformation in a city or in and around that location where it's plugged in. So why is this relevant? So the relevance of V2G and the way that it's sort of progressing is an incredibly relevant fact when you're talking about medium and heavy duty vehicles. So, school buses, for instance, if you've got electric school buses, let's say you have 10 of them and they're all parked in a yard at night when there's no school and the kids are home sleeping in bed, and those vehicles are plugged into a bidirectional charger or a V2G sort of charging setup. Those big batteries in the school buses, 200 or 300 kilowatt hours of battery storage, can help with the power needs of that sort of local area. Through this technology, the grid can sort of take and be supported by those big batteries parked there, stationary, not doing anything, and also put energy back into them so that they are full in the morning when they need to go. So the advancement of this sort of technology, this charging system that's connected to the cloud, which understands that there's going to be a push and pull of energy, but with the sort of the end goal of having a full battery at the end of the day, it kind of works it out for you. And this is an incredible advantage for fleets that have multiple vehicles that are stationary and not needed before a certain time. Again, dwell time comes into play here. If the vehicle's sitting for a long period of time, it doesn't necessarily need to be charged at a high rate of charge. It could be used to help the grid balance and power houses or charge other vehicles at other locations, and then later on be able to receive energy and be fully charged when it's needed to go and do its duty.
And I find that really interesting that a lot of what I've tried to kind of talk about over this series is the people, right? Is learning about how, we have the power to make these decisions, that it really does start with us. But something that I've learned today is that the data is vital. This is a key part in making that decision. And as much as we like to talk about personal stories and people, the data itself is a storyteller. Not in the conventional sense, but it's a storyteller in the sense that it allows you to make the best decisions for your fleet, for your business, and the world at large. And as we've talked about here just in the last couple of minutes, we've seen that there is a lot of integration with technology, and I think that's important. That's all for today's episode. Thanks so much for sitting down and chatting with us. A huge thanks to today's guest, Charlotte Argue with Geotab. The Go Electric Fleet Show is made possible by Plug-in BC, and I hope that you've taken something from today's episode. I took away learnings about the value and the power behind data, and how data can really work for you. On behalf of Brendon James, my name is Andrew, and you're all charged up and ready to go. Hey there. Thanks for joining us on the Go Electric Fleet Show. Please like and subscribe for more content about electric vehicle fleets in British Columbia and beyond.